Hey, I'm Diamond David Lee Roth. Heard you miss me? Well, I'm back, and I'm not alone. This is
Steve Vai
and
Billy Sheehan.
Yeah, we got the Power Twins here, man. Enough with the opening act. It's showtime.
The one and only Billy Sheehan!
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of On the Patio. I'm Dean. This morning, coming in via Skype, all the way from Nashville, Tennessee. There is no introduction. There are no words that I need to worry about wasting. Let's just get to it, all right? It's Billy Sheehan. Billy, welcome to On the Patio.
Thank you very much, Dean. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Well, the pleasure is mine, and the pleasure is ours to have you on. Nothing in particular that we're going to talk about other than, hey, it's Billy Sheehan. There's decades of music, Talus, UFO, the Winery Dogs. I could go on. David Lee Roth. Who haven't you played or sessioned with?
A lot, but I'm very grateful and very lucky to have worked with a lot of wonderful people and incredible talents, and very, very, very nice to look back on it sometimes.
Well, it's an incredible journey, I could imagine, for you picking up that instrument. And you are not traditional. I've watched and studied you. You're not a traditional bass player. And I'd like to talk about that a minute.
Yeah, I definitely took a few left turns, but I never left traditional behind, though. I can still, I've got I just bought a 1967 Fender Bassman amp and cabinet, and I have about a 1968 Telecaster bass here. Just for fun, I'll just, the Bassman's coming soon, so I can't wait to do it. But I just set up the Bassman, take one chord, plug the bass into the Bassman, no pedals, no nothing, no effects, and just play straight up, without anything on it. And I played a lot of sessions where, and on a lot of records where it was just basic bass required. And there's such a great art to that. And a lot of guys that are worrying about all the flying around and shenanigans, sadly, they don't know about that basic bass. So they get themselves in trouble. But I think what has been a saving aspect for me is that I grew up playing. I started at the beginning and came up and learned how to play songs and perform and please a crowd and lay down the rock solid bass. Then it evolved from there and went into insanity. Have that as a foundation, because without it, I know a lot of guys that can do amazing stuff and mind blowing, but they can't really. I had a conversation with Marcus Miller one time, and he just put us. They can't drive the band. They can't. And you mentioned Kenny Aronoff to me earlier. Wonderful guy and great player. We did a rock and roll fantasy camp jam together one time, and as soon as I start playing, I go right over to the drummer because I got to lock in with what he's doing. I'm not worried about what the guitar player's doing or hammer-ons or nonsense. Got to go right over the drum. And I was right there with him, following every move he did. And at the end, I don't know if he realized it, but he gave me a compliment I was very, very honored to have. He goes, "Oh, I see. You're a drummer, aren't you?" Because bass and drums are where it's at. other stuff, all the other non-traditional stuff, is a blast, and it's fun, and I love to do it. But it's based on 18 inches of solid concrete foundation with a lot of rebar. So that's the only reason I believe it sometimes works, if it does.
I totally I appreciate and agree with you. Seeing that foundation, you've laid probably 36 inches of foundation with
could be
double the amount of rebar, maybe some titanium and everything else mixed in from the kitchen sink. Going to basics, that basic core. And as we talked about your age with respect to coming through not just the industry, but music in itself, the birth of rock and roll and the analog style of, no overdubs, there wasn't any patches or samples. It was just straight through. Just had to play it. You couldn't fake it. There was no Pro Tools.
No faking it. It's amazing what you can do now. I mean, you can just basically utter a syllable and the record's done. Or play one note and they'll move it around. Yeah, but I remember I was lucky because I had older brother and sisters, and they were all into music. And my mom was into music. She's a generation before me. So I heard all my mom's music: Sinatra, Tony Bennett, Ella Fitzgerald, Bobby Darin, great vocalists and amazing bands, Count Basie Orchestra, Woody Herman, stuff like that. I was into stuff that is like the Cretaceous era to kids today. I didn't even heard this stuff. Then the Everly Brothers and Jerry Lee Lewis, and I wasn't much of an Elvis fan ever, but that era prior to the Beatles was a big thing. And I remember listening to the radio and in the early 60s before the Beatles hit, and then get all that under your skin is a good thing. Then when the Beatles hit, all hell broke loose, and everybody had to be in a band. Everybody had to be musicians. So I got caught up in that, like about probably 40 or 50 million other people at the time.
Sure,
there's a lot of people. So, and then it went on from there into all the various permutations and variations of styles of music. I was into a lot of classical music very early on, and a lot of jazz also. But rock was really where I was my main thing, rock and heavy rock, and then eventually even heavier rock. But I love the fact that I can still go back to those artists and those records and really gain so much as a listener and as a fan of that music. I think it was a huge help to me.
We all came out from Montreux on the way to leave our shoreline to make records with the more power. We didn't have much time. A Frank Zappa and a mother were at the best place around. This time, let's run it up. And now, all right, help me out with that. Smoke on the water, fire in the sky. I know I did it wrong. Smoke on the water, keep me burning.
You obviously watched the birth of something and then became part of that. As it culminated, if you will, and grew. You grew up with that as it did in its infancy, and it's amazing that you speak about those artists that I grew up with, because my father, being a musician and playing all those tracks in his band, and even though I'm a little bit younger, I have the appreciation for that music, and the era is it's really timeless, and it does resemble some of the roots of where music is today, and most people don't know any of those bands and those tracks.
Yeah, I remember being in LA, we'd be out at a club and a bunch of people come back to my house and we'd start playing CDs before we were streaming anything. Start playing stuff, and I'd say, and they go, I'm into metal, and I go, well, I got some metal for you. Check this out. And I put on Frank Sinatra Live at the Sands of the Count Basie Orchestra, Quincy Jones conducting, and they be, at first they're, what the hell, and then after a while I go, I kind of get it. And I go, the only difference is the metal is brass. It's not steel. Right. And it was just an amazing, that's one of the greatest records ever made. Just done right. I've always loved turning people on to music, especially stuff they've never heard of before or a new thing. I'm down here in my studio now, and we're finally up and running and actually recording. But prior to that, I would just have people on. We'd play songs out of my iTunes collection, which was quite elaborate. I got about 2 terabytes of iTunes, everything in the right folder with the cover art and the names. I've spent thousands of hours fine-tuning my iTunes collection. So people come down and I'll play them all kinds of stuff they've never heard before, and they always walk out, with a different point of view. It's pretty cool.
It's running through her veins like cyanide. It rush her by, but just for a while. How long can't you keep on chasing something wrong? Memories of how she could have made it. The waves are crashing down, she's caught in the undertow, drowning in the sea, yeah. She's looking for a light, but there's nowhere to go. Undertow.
What's your favorite right now, Billy? What's the go-to when you're listening, or just you're mentioning you're doing some chores and some errands and things around the house? What's driving Billy Sheehan when you get up and you want to listen to a track? What's happening on the iTunes for you?
Well, there's a guy named Eddie Harris. He played electric sax. The sax with a little adapter on it, and he had a couple of records out in the late '60s, and some really cool stuff. He did a Montreux Jazz Festival with Eddie Harris and Les McCann.
Jeez,
it's a legendary jazz record, but it's cool. It's great. It's got a groove to it. That's a big one. Spooky Tooth, great band from the '70s. Amazing guitar player. Been listening to that a little bit lately, invigorating my love of that. There's some oddball stuff. I got some Bulgarian choir. I think if you just Google it, you can find some. And it's a choir of mostly female, but male and female too. They do things with their voices that is inhuman, and it's all real because there's no way you could fake this.
Sure.
There's chord harmonies that are so close. If you're off by a molecule, it's not going to sound right. And the rhythmic aspects of what they're doing are beyond belief. And it's great to hear, even if it's not your thing musically. It's amazing to hear greatness. I mean, really, people that are at the absolute tip-top of their technical ability. And then you go back and you play whatever it is you do. It's always inspiring.
Sure.
So, I don't listen to a lot of new stuff. Once in a while, something comes around that catches my ear. Very often.
I see.
Because I could still continue to explore the unlistened to old stuff in my iTunes for the rest of my days easily. And
of course.
There'd be a lot left over.
Two terabytes is probably at least a good week's worth of listening music.
Oh, it's actually not even sure what it says, but it's over a year.
I'm sure.
I think it'll take over a year to listen.
Absolutely.
2 terabytes.
Definitely a Renaissance man talking about the different cultures and how I know a few musicians that take different nationalities' folk music and then they rock and roll it. And there's a lot of cross-pollination I've noticed with some of the different nationalities of music. it's very interesting in how traditional that music is. It's still alive, and when you talk about music, it's universal.
Yeah, I remember. Well, I just happened upon there's a guy named Don Ellis. You've probably heard his name.
I have.
Don Ellis was a trumpet player, but he had a band that was very experimental and did a lot of oddball time signatures. This was late 60s, early 70s. And he did a couple of things in India, and they were pretty exciting.
Sure.
I always remember him because that's when I first discovered musicians borrowing heavily from other musicians. Chicago did a piece called Introductions, and in it had a section that was in the time signature 19/8, and it was counted 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 1 2 1 2 1 2. That adds up to 19. But that's how the rhythm of it went. Of course, somebody brought Don Ellis in one record one day, and it's Don Ellis introducing the song. Count it off. 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. And they played it in 19. I say, oh, that's where Chicago got it from. And
wow.
Perfect sense. Because they're a horn band. They must have known of Don Ellis. I was a huge Chicago fan. Anyway, James Pankow, he was a trombonist separately. One really great player, too. But cross-pollination thing is, it can always be an incredible source of new ideas. When the Beatles first started to get into Indian music, and you heard a sitar on them starting, I believe, with the Revolver record, suddenly there was a huge interest in not only in Indian music, but Indian culture, and Indian religions, and Indian food, and everything. It's very interesting to see. And from that little taste, I started to get into actual, real Indian music. Ravi Shankar. Later on, I don't think he's related, but his name is the letter L, Shankar, an Indian violinist that plays with Frank Zappa. Brilliant, brilliant player. The Indian sounds and scales are still in there, even though it's a Western instrument, a violin. So I used to listen to it all the time, and I can, every once in a while, I'll hear my playing back, and I'll hear the Dakota Indian thing, a little bit, with a droning note and moving around it. And so it's a cool thing. I urge musicians to, and just casual listeners, to branch out.
You mentioned that influence, if you will, of another culture, and how that affects you. Obviously, growing up listening to rock and being a heavy rocker, you know, there's no light rock pop there in your repertoire.
There was once.
Sure, Billy. If the bass wasn't on your plate, if it wasn't the 4-string monster with you doing what you do, if you were to pick another instrument, what would it be for you to take and launch into the stratosphere with music? What would it be for you?
Probably drums. Probably drums. As a bass player, I do clinics, master classes, and things of that nature. A lot of young players come out, and I'm blown away that sometimes they don't understand the relationship between bass and drums.
The marriage.
Yeah, you got to play what the drummer's playing. You got to play it with them like you were joined at the hip. If you don't, that's the foundation of everything else that's happening in that song. And when I was very young, there was a bass player that lived around the corner. He's the guy who inspired me initially, and his name was Joe Hesse. And he, I couldn't go in and listen to the band practice. My older brother and sisters could, but I was a little kid, so they leave me outside. I'm like, get out of here, kid, you're bothering me. But so I sit outside the basement window and listen to them practice. And I go home, and I'd have to go to bed early, and I could hear the bass through the neighborhood. You know, I could hear it while I'm laying in bed. One day I went over, and Joe was there, and he let me come in. He's a nice guy, you know. He just, when a lot of people practice and it gets too crowded, so I couldn't come in there. But he let me come in, and Joe was, and it was just him and the drummer, and they're playing together. Joe, where's the rest of the band? Why aren't they here? He goes, well, see, I practice with the drummer because every time the drummer hits a bass drum, I got to play a bass note. So I'm playing along. So before I even owned a bass, I learned that rock solid rule number one for bass, which again was a great, great help to me as time went on. Sure. Because that's the foundation that gets laid. You understand? As long as you hit a note when that bass drum hits, even if it's not the right note, you're ahead of the game. You know, That's how it's supposed to be. So
Very
it would
awesome.
probably be drums. But I like I like a lot of the string instruments. Cello would be pretty cool. It's pretty closely related to bass, though.
Right.
But and I can actually get a tone and a sound out of the embouchure instruments like trumpet and trombone, and also saxophones. Having played in a horn band, we would always be fooling around, and I'd pick up the trumpet and be able to get a tone out of it. And I always surprise people when I go somewhere and there's a sax or a trumpet, and I can pick it up and actually I know where to put my fingers and make a sound come out of it. Whoa! How'd you learn to do that? I didn't. I'm just faking it.
Right. That's excellent. That shows a lot of passion, obviously, that you have for not just the bass, but for other instruments. And you obviously live and breathe music. Would you mind if you had a moment? Could we see a little bit of what your go-tos are hanging on the blue sea of instruments behind you? Could we?
Oh, sure, yeah.
You could show off a little of your wares.
I can explain here. Get this light out of my eyes. This first guy here, I'm trying to coordinate. Yeah, this is it's a 6-string Yamaha TRB, and I don't normally play 5 or 6. It's always 4. But when I started with the Yamaha, they were very kind and very generous, and they gave me this. It's the first version of the TRB bass, and it was kind of interesting. So on the song "Just Take My Heart" by Mr.Big, I used this. Live, I didn't. Live, I would manage to get the low note without this. But that was used on this in the video and on the recording. Next to it is you'll see the frets. I don't know if you can see they look crooked.
Yes.
It's a true temperament treatment where they replace the frets with their special. Let me get this out of my eyes here. Sorry, with special frets that are designed to make every note on the bass play exactly in tune. And when you hear it next to a regular bass, you realize there are some things that are out of tune, but your ear tends to kind of correct them.
Yes.
And you're kind of used to that out of tuneness anyway. They do it with guitars too, any fretted instrument. But it's amazing. So when I'm playing with a keyboard player, a lot of times it's because they're always in tune. They can be fine tuned like that. Sometimes a bass like this is very handy because I'm right in with them. After that is it's the 25th anniversary Attitude bass. Then a BEX. This was a bass that I designed with Yamaha with a hollow body, and it's a cool sounding bass. I love the Paul Samwell Smith played an Epiphone Rivoli, which is a Gibson 335 body, which isn't truly a hollow body. It's got a slab in the middle of it. That's why the 335s are stable as opposed to an actual hollow body. So this was in a similar manner. It's a solid piece hollowed out and a flat piece put on top. So it isn't a true hollow body instrument, but it has some of the characteristic. Next to that is a Richie Costin Strat. Richie was kind enough to lay one of these on me. It plays great. It's got a big fat neck and it's so comfortable. And Richie is the grand master of it, of course. But behind it is my Strat, which I had for years. I wrote Shy Boy on this and all the Tala stuff. And most everything I wrote on electric guitar got written on that. It was a $35 Schecter body with a knot hole in it, reject. And a guy came to a show one time with a garbage bag full of guitar parts, and in it was a Telly neck, a Jazzmaster body, a bunch of bridges and things. He said, "You want it?" I go, "How much?" He goes, $35. I go, "Okay." So the whole guitar actually costs under $100.
That's great.
It's rock solid. It plays great. Next, just a little. I have to put the small guitars here because when you sit down, you hit your head.
Of course.
So I had to put whatever I had. I've got this cool little shred neck travel bass, kind of fun bass to play. A Kayla little ukulele kind of bass, and surprisingly, it sounds so much like a stand-up bass.
Almost an acoustic.
In recording, some people say, "Well, you're using a stand-up?" I go, "No, this is a tiny little thing." It's crazy. Then next to that is the ukulele version of this guy here.
Oh, yes.
And that's my main. All the Yamaha Attitudes were modeled after this. Same neck dimension, same position of the knobs. But we made it, I did many modifications on this P bass. I think it's a 69. The neck is a 68 Telecaster neck. I put the Telecaster neck on there because I saw Tim Bogert on the cover of Beck, Bogert and Appice, their first record. And he had what I thought was a Tele neck on a P bass. It turns out later he told me that was just a different headstock that Fender made for that bass for him. But this was, it's got about, probably 4,000 gigs on it.
Billy, is that considered the wife?
Yeah, that's her.
Yes.
That's the one. And this is her sister behind it. It's another version of it. Because back in the day, in the club days, I had the luxury of having an extra instrument with me in case something goes wrong.
Yes.
So it usually stayed in the truck, but I played it a couple times. And one time when I had the frets, had to do a refret on the wife, I swapped this neck out so I could play it in the meantime. So they've been a little bit of cross-dressing there, however you want to put it.
Sure.
Then behind it is the Yamaha 30 anniversary prototype, which pays homage to the wife. As you can see, the neck is kind of distressed, but not really distressed, but it's a darker color. And it's a Yamaha Attitude, but it's made to look at it. We did the chrome pickup there, and
That's
the
amazing.
same. We did the like we do on the Yamaha Attitude bases. So I got the three of them together there. It's kind of the terrible trio of the old, the backup, and the new version of it.
Yes.
So that's pretty cool. And then Yamaha has been very kind to me over the years and made a couple of really great custom versions of the Attitude bass and some custom instruments on top of it. And this one is the 8-string. So it's basically just an Attitude bass.
Yes.
But it's an 8-stringer. They did some pretty fancy schmancy
The inlay.
inlay. The only problem with the inlay is the knees landed on the 11th fret. And the 12th fret is usually where you have the double thing. So I had to put put an extra little, I usually have to put a little sticker on there. So I
Sure.
could make sure I knew where the 12th fret was.
Right.
That's pretty cool. Then some basic Attitude basses. I got a red and a blue. And this is a cheaper version. A dear friend of mine, Jamie, he got me a couple of the basses that I never had. Yamaha did inexpensive versions of the Attitude bass.
I see.
And these two are them. He was kind enough to gift those to me. It was pretty cool. So I never had them. This is one with, I don't know if it works or not, but the batteries are dead. The neck lights up. Another custom one is a fretless version of the Attitude bass. Another red one. This is the prototype for version 1. This is the second one ever. It's got a red, I did some modifications on it. And a couple more here. And then the other one, we've got a lot more if you got time.
We've got time if you do.
All right, here we go.
Well, thank you.
I'll make it quick.
This is amazing. We're currently on tour right now with Billy Sheehan, going through the multi rooms of his studio.
So you can see now there's a lot of instruments, but bear in mind it's been over 50 years.
Of course.
So I've managed to get a lot of these together. I'll try to get a little bit more light on the subject. That's a little better. So basically I've got, I put up, when I first got here, I put these racks up. It was kind of like a Guitar Center way of hanging stuff, but it's really a great way to do it. And this is kind of my area down here in the house where I do all my music and nonsense and whatever. So it's kind of nice to have here. You have a couple people over, got a few amps on the ground there. I got an old Pierce and Mesa Boogie. The basement amp is coming, as I said, so we'll be able to sit down here and play. But I'll just go through them quick. Robin octave guitar. It's a guitar, but it starts at the 12th fret. So
yes.
So it's very high pitched. They don't make them anymore. I think they're robbing companies out of business, but they're just great instrument. Great because it's the full width. It's not really a small version, and the body is a full-size body. You can actually play it. Pretty cool. Yamaha won a bunch of design awards for this guitar. It's the body is kind of a balsa wood, super lightweight wood, and then covered with hardwood. So it's got a really cool tone to it. This is a $150 Chinese Strat. A friend of mine gave it to me for a joke Christmas gift one time. And Billy Gibbons came to my house to play on my solo record, Holy Cow. And he brought a Telecaster with him, but I think he must have grabbed the wrong guitar because I knew he was it was strung too heavy and, it wasn't working. So what I had done with this, when I got it, is I tuned it down to a low B. So it's tuned down 5 frets. So the strings are just flopping around on there. These are the factory strings too. So the song I was doing was done on a baritone guitar that's tuned like that. So I said to him, "You want to try the Strat out? It's just I can put some different strings in. Let me try it." I go, "This is fine. I'll do it on the." So Billy did his solo on the $150 Strat through a pod, and I play it for people, and they go, "Hey, guess who the guitarist is?" As soon as you start to go, Billy Gibbons, instantly recognizable. And what a wonderful, incredible man. And I'm the biggest ZZ Top Billy Gibbons fan. Dusty and Frank Beard, too. I love those guys so much. Paul Gilbert was kind enough to give me one of his Ibanez guitars one time for some occasion. Very nice. My Kramer, my first endorsement was with Kramer years ago, but then I went to the factory and saw what they were doing, and I couldn't in good conscience continue to endorse them. They were making guitars in such a horrible manner that I couldn't do it. It was just, they were violating every woodworking rule you could imagine. Nice people though. But anyway, so when I got this, they made a couple of necks for Ed Van Halen. And I asked them if they had one, could they put it on mine? And they did. So this is a Van Halen neck on here.
That's amazing.
Pretty cool. This is a Yamaha SG, and the cool thing about it, I wish I could demonstrate it for you, but it'd take a lot more time. It's got the Evertune bridge, and that's a bridge that makes the guitar play in tune, similar to the True Temperament.
Yes.
That I had on the bass.
Yes.
But every note on the neck is in tune, and I don't know why. And you can play wacky, crazy chords way up high, and everything is in tune. Only problem with it is you lose a little bit of sustain because the strings are kind of on a spring,
right?
A mechanism. Not much, almost unnoticeable.
Sure.
But everything on it is in tune all the time. You can't knock it out of tune.
That's amazing.
You can even turn the as you turn the tuner, it doesn't change the pitch. It's crazy. Then my dear friend and an amazing, mind-blowing player, Steve Vai, was kind enough to lay one of his guitars on me years ago. And I keep it in a place of honor here. He's like a brother to me, and he's as anybody that's ever heard him knows, he's a genius. That's pretty cool. A baritone Alvarez Yeri acoustic tune B2B. Regular chords work, but they're all down 5 frets. This is a hand-made in Japan baritone 12-string out of tune, and it's strung a little too light too. One good thing about having them all here is I take them down one at a time into the workshop and do what needs to be done on them. That is a daunting task, though. There's a lot of instruments here.
I would imagine.
Then an Alvarez Yeri, St. Louis Music, which owned Ampeg in the 90s, also distributed Alvarez Yeri, a great guitar out of Japan. And they were very kind to lay the baritone on me, and also the 6-string, which is my go-to 6-string almost all the time. It's a great sounding instrument. And a Guild 12, I had a great Guild 12 Sunburst, was stolen, and Guild was kind enough to replace it for me with this all maple body 12-string. It's a great instrument, and from what I understand, this particular model has held its worth and gone up quite a bit in value.
I would imagine.
Taylor 12-string, can't miss. Taylor is just awesome, and this is a lot of my industrial go-to 12-string acoustic that can't be beat. It's rock solid. it stays in tune. It sounds fantastic. In some oddball hallucination of self-aggrandizement, I thought I might be able to get along on an actual classical guitar with finger picking, but it's a whole different world of finger picking than it is made. So I keep it here to remind myself that I can't do that. Don't do that. If you can't do that, don't do that. And but it sounds great, and it's a GC30, and it's quite an awesome handmade instrument.
Beautiful, Billy.
As I said before, I did a bunch of other custom instruments from Yamaha. This is a baritone 12-string, and I love the Rickenbacker 12 strings, but they're really tough to change strings on.
Yes.
And it's not a real practical instrument, but you cannot beat the sound. So we put Rickenbacker pickups in it to get kind of a little bit of that tone.
Wonderful.
Because I had a Rick 12 that I got from a music store, and it just sounded so glorious. The first single I ever bought was 8 Miles High by the Byrds, with a 12-string whining, brilliant sounding, droning. I love that tone. So I had one, but it was a lot of work to keep, other than to keep it around for once in a while. To actually utilize it was a lot of string changing was difficult on it. So I traded it in on a baritone Strat, which is a custom shop Fender Strat, but it's a baritone.
Yes.
So its low string is a B. And a lot of the records and my solo records, one of the reasons I started doing solo records because I had these baritone instruments and my voice is low, so I could match up my vocals with that.
Right.
So that's a baritone Strat. Joe Viette out of Woodstock, New York. That's a great, nice compact baritone 12. I found one used.
Yes.
He's kind enough to electrify it for me with a DiMarzio pickup in there. Pretty cool.
Beautiful.
And this was my first baritone 12 that inspired me to start doing solo records. It's hollow body, old Yamaha shape, and they custom made it for me. And it just plays great, sounds great, and it's like holding an orchestra in your lap. It's so great. There's an amazing guitar company out of Ireland called Emerald. They do graphite, all one piece molded graphite instruments, and they are divine. They're amazing. They stay in tune forever, and they sound great. And now they're doing, it's not on this, but they're doing an inlay, a very thin inlay of exotic woods on the surface. So it looks like an acoustic guitar, but it's a rock solid graphite.
That's
staying in tune, no matter how hard you hit it. But so they did a baritone 12 string here for me. It's pretty awesome. And the only collector's instruments I have are the following three and one more. A friend of mine's dad had a Gibson acoustic. He passed away. He was going to put it in the estate sale. I said, "What? Let me buy it from you. That way, at least your dad's guitar, you know where it is. I'll have it. If you need it back, you can get it back from me." So it's a student model. I think I paid $1,800 for it, and it's worth $1,800, like the Antique Roadshow. You know, how much you pay for it? Well, that's what it's worth. So I'm sure it'll go up in value, but it's a great, real, true hollow body Gibson. Really nice. Here's the Epiphone Rivoli. That big pickup here is why I have the pickup on all of my attitude basses in the neck position. That was the tone. Paul Samuel Smith, Paul McCartney had that tone also, because you see on the Hofner, the neck position pickup.
Yes.
That's where that tone comes from. And that's the next instrument, the Hofner. I wanted to get a Paul McCartney Beatle bass, the violin shape. I went to England in the 90s to do some clinics, and they had a bunch, but none of them were really a good shape, and they cost a fortune because everybody kind of had the same idea. So this was hanging on the wall, which is the exact same thing, same electronics, same everything. And I think it's the Stuart Sutcliffe model. Stuart Sutcliffe had one similar to this, only black pickups. These are silver. So I said to him, "How much you want for that?" He goes, "Oh, about 200 pounds. Sold."
I'll take it.
And so I grabbed it instantly, and I'm very glad I have it. And then acoustic Yamaha bass, another acoustic, a guitarlele, which is a 6-string guitar strung guitarlele, and I forgot the name of it. It's a Turkish instrument. It'll come to me. Those are most of the acoustic guitars up there. Then in the racks, I had these racks for my instruments. And once you set them down, they kind of got to stay down. And down here, I have people coming and going. So I put them all on skateboard wheels, so you can move them around if you need to. These are some utilitarian. I had the silver Attitude that I use on a Steve Vai tour and a couple other tours. This bass has a whammy bar on it, but it's not in fully functioning yet. Another just a straight up out of the box blue. The BEX prototype, and then the production model.
Yes.
A prototype Attitude color, which never was a blue-black blend.
Oh, that's beautiful.
A Zamatis instrument. They're really quite amazing with the. You see these okay, Dean?
I do, Billy. Yes.
Okay.
And I'm familiar with that flavor of instrument.
Say again.
I'm familiar with that flavor of instrument.
Oh, the Zamatis.
Yes.
Yeah, they're quite awesome. They were very kind. They got in touch with me and said I told them, well, I have a deal with Yamaha, so I can't. So, well, that's no problem. We just want to make one. So I was very, very kind, generous of them. Very cool. Chandler made instruments. So I had them those wild metal flake. I put black nylon tape wound strings on, which are on the Epiphone Rivoli bass, because that's what Paul Samwell Smith from the Yardbirds did. So I must imitate him because he's my hero.
Sure.
Then 2 Yamaha Attitude Purple, 10-year anniversary.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Then the double neck purple hasn't seen live action yet, but will soon, probably with Sons of Apollo.
Yes.
Going to do a couple modifications to it coming up. Double neck guitar and bass, and the guitar has the Evertune bridge. So I only have one thing to tune, the bass. I can leave the guitar alone. That'll make life a little easier. Then my only other collectible is this very nice Fender 68 Telecaster. I'm sure that's not the original pickguard.
Yes.
But I got it for pretty cheap. It was just a couple $100. But the neck is that Telecaster, big, fat, giant,
yes,
beautiful. It weighs a ton.
Looks like a CBS headstock.
It could be. It could be.
Yes. Yes.
I believe it's a 68, though. I ran the serial number.
I see.
And,
that's amazing.
And speaking of heavy, this is the Winery Dogs wine-colored bass. So it's kind of it's see-through, as you can see.
Of course.
And the fret markers are wine bottles, and the knobs are corks.
That is great.
It weighs a ton, but it plays great. And I had a whole bunch of parts left over from the 70s and all my nonsense over the years. So I decided to use them all, build some basses and use up the parts. So I got a warm-off, 2 warm-off bodies, P-bass bodies, and 2 warm-off Telecaster necks. And I cannot speak more highly of the quality of the warm-off stuff. Everything fits perfectly with it. I think they're licensed by Fender too to actually make.
They are. Yes.
Unbelievable. So there's 2 of those. So I took all my old EBO pickups, all of my leftover stuff, and put them all on there, and they're basically it's an imitation of the wife bass in the other room. I did 2 like that, but then I had some stuff left over, so I went to a cheap online $30 body, a $30 neck, and used up all my other stuff. And actually, I made 2 of these. One's upstairs, but they actually play pretty good. So people complain to me about the Attitude bass. This is an expensive bass. Sorry, it's not about $5 of that is going to me. That's if that. Actually, more like $1.25. But basically, it does what an Attitude bass does for under $100. 2 pickups, body, 2 outputs, no problem. And it's pretty lightweight too. Actually, plays pretty good. There was a young lady that contacted me online, and her husband very sadly had passed away.
I see.
And he was a big fan, and so she wanted me to have his bass, and I thought that was incredibly touching. So I'm now the caretaker of his bass. I make sure it's always in good shape, nicely dusted off. I make sure to play it every once in a while. I didn't really know the guy, but I just thought it was incredibly wonderful to have people out there that enjoy my playing, and when something like this happens, that his wife wanted me to have his bass. Very touching, pretty amazing thing. And so I keep it in a place of honor always, and I'll take. And if she ever needs it back, I'll give it back to her. Then there's a Fretlife bass, which is a bass with lights, you can't see them, but they're embedded in the neck. And you plug it in, and it shows you where to put your fingers. So in case I ever need help, I got the fretless bass, or the fret light bass.
Right.
It's actually pretty cool. And I'm never so arrogant as to think that I know anything, really. But it's great to sit down with some training method and thing, and it shows you how. I guarantee that people think, "Oh, I didn't know that before." Oh, well, it's pretty cool. It's a whole new way of looking at things. So I'm never opposed to humbling myself and learning something. Fortunately for me, that has been a very blessing in disguise, or maybe a blessing not well disguised at all, but because there's still a lot to know. In the Mount Everest of musical knowledge, I'm up about a foot. But I'm up in the climb. I'm about 12 inches up, so there's a lot more to learn. When I was a kid, my very first bass I had before my P bass was this Hagstrom.
Right. That you took the frets off.
This isn't the bass, but this is the same exact model.
Yes.
And it's a tiny toy-like thing with it's all plastic and vinyl. And I remember when I got my P bass, I pulled the frets out of this and made a fretless version. But somebody found out that was my first bass, and they tracked one down for me and sent it to me. It was pretty cool.
That's very kind.
Yeah, I'm incredibly lucky. People have been very generous and giving, and I do everything I can to reciprocate. Plus, this is the Yamaha 714. It's the BB series that they kind of made like an Attitude, also kind of cross between the two. Very nice, rock solid. Yamaha cannot go wrong. That's just their quality control is second to none. Speaking of which, a dear friend of mine, Bobby Devlin, New York City area, he showed up at my Talus gig we did last year and goes, "Hey, I got something for you." I go, "What is it?" It was this bass. Unbelievable. So he made this incredible Fender with the double output.
Yes.
And the Telecaster version of the EBO pickup. And it's just fantastic. And it plays great. And Bobby's a great player, a wonderful guy, a dear friend of mine. And okay, the final two. Here we go. Larry DiMarzio in the early 80s started manufacturing some instruments. He did a jazz version and a P-bass version. For a while, I had this neck on the guitar that has a whammy.
Yes.
I used it in a couple photos, so people always ask where the orange neck or the pink neck whammy bass is. Well, the neck is back where it belongs. And there's two of them, this one and the P-bass version. Pretty cool. Larry is a dear friend. We have a brand new version of his pickups coming out that are going to be awesome. I have them actually on the 30-year anniversary Attitude bass. They're actually formed to follow the radius of the neck, and they're all rounded off. There's no sharp edges. There's no screw sticking up. You can put your thumb on the thing. Here's the prototype shape. This isn't how they'll be built. It's just a prototype shape. It's all smoothed off. That little thing is down low, so the screw is out of your way.
Right.
You see how they're curved? When you put them both together, it makes the curve of the neck. Again, this isn't the final design.
Yes.
This little thing here, it turns out, in the end, he put a flat circuit board along the bottom and then laid the pickup on top of it.
I see.
And so that's coming out very, very soon. So anyway, that's my guitar collection.
Oh, that's...
And I try to play them all a lot. You know, I always grab one on Friday night or whatever. You hear a cork pop and a glass being filled, and then we're at it. You know, we're down here fooling around with them. It's pretty cool.
It's an amazing tour and very humbling, but also to hear your modesty about where you're at in your career. And I'll argue with you very respectfully that you're much more than a foot off.
I'll fight you. I'll fight you.
Yeah. I certainly wouldn't want to take that.
When you really see yourself, and it's really great for no matter what endeavor you're involved in, to really take a look at yourself. And I'm a troubleshooter. I don't have any talent. I just troubleshoot. There's the bass neck with strings and frets. There's music. Those notes are on that neck somewhere. Let's figure it out. And you troubleshoot, and that's how you eventually figure out how to do it. But I never picked up an instrument and said, hey, this is working for me. It was a struggle uphill the whole way. So it's important to find, when you're troubleshooting, it's important to find problems, because then it's great when you find a problem, because then you've got something to solve. And when you solve it, you're going to be ahead. So I'm permanently in a state of mind where I'm only looking at the stuff I can't do, or that I'm not good at, or things that need to be improved. So I never let conquer territory I pay no attention to. So I'm always in a state of mind of, I got to fix that. Oh, this could be better. Oh, I'm not doing that right. Oh, I keep missing that note. So it's kind of a good state of mind, I think, to be in, no matter what you do, because you're always moving forward. Sometimes glacially slow.
Yes.
But sometimes you get lucky and you make a little jump. Like during this whole quarantine thing, I'm sitting around and practicing. A couple things are starting to work. Who would have thunk it? So it's crazy. Of course.
No, that's constant motion and innovation, and also the water doesn't stay stagnant, if you will.
Yeah, you got to move.
Good for the mind.
Moving. I've been playing about 54 years, and man, I still discover something new every single day.
Yes,
every single day, some new thing.
That's amazing.
Pretty cool.
Billy, when the world comes back online, so to speak, with live music and concerts and whatnot, where do you see yourself? Obviously, I would imagine next year, but where do you see yourself with Sons and Winery Dogs, and what other solo projects can you tell everyone that's going to come out? What are you going to be up to?
Well, one of the reasons I reconfigured my studio is we're about to complete the new Talus record, my original band I had back in Buffalo. Yes. The second version of it, including some players from Rochester. We had the drums are done. The guy's going to drive down here pretty soon, and we're going to do the vocals, guitar, bass, and get it all squared away, mix it up. It's going to be cool. The drummer, Mark Miller, is as good as ever, mind-blowing player. And so we're really excited about that. I'm doing a solo record also with another drummer, Ray Lugier from Korn, a dear friend of mine. He lives down here in Nashville also. And we actually started a production company, myself, Ray, and a wonderful engineer named Scott Bush. And we're actually helping people get their records up to speed and recording a lot of people that couldn't get recorded otherwise, and doing a rock solid killer bass and drums for them to lay as a basis for their record. So it's a kind of a cool thing. We're working, oddly, one of our first clients is a kind of a singer-songwriter, a little bit countrified, but not country. But it's kind of like the Outlaws or the Eagles, or a little bit a Southern rock kind of a thing, but just songwriting that is unbelievable. He said we're up to about 45 songs now of him having written, and man, there's about 44 of them are hits. So probably 45 are hits. He's just a great songwriter. So we're doing all kinds of things with that production. Then we'll probably continue the Sons of Apollo tour a bit, but my main focus for next year will be the Winery Dogs. I hope. I love both of those bands, but touring with the Winery Dogs is a blast because there's only 3 guys. Right. It's way easier, and it's a lot more improvisational. Sons of Apollo, very demanding music, and you gotta hit the mark exactly right. There's room for improv, but I do like the fact that it's different, because I'm normally an improv player, just kind of wing it and do the basic arrangement, but you're still improvising a lot. Where Sons of Apollo, you can't do that. You got to kind of stand in line. Color in between the lines there a little bit. So it's a different discipline. So I like that. When I break out of that, it's fun to be off improvising again. So hopefully we'll do the next Winery Dogs record and tour next year.
Yes.
We'll be writing and recording it this year, I hope.
Yes.
And so we're excited about that. And I haven't heard anything about anything with Mr.Big, but whatever happens, I'll post that. We're currently not performing. As you may know, we lost our drummer a few years back, and we did our makeup shows without him that had already been booked before we lost him, and it was great. But man, it's hard to play without him, So we may go out and play again, but we're not sure.
Pat was an incredible man and an incredible drummer.
Yeah, he was a wonderful man, incredible husband to his wife and father to his son, and a drummer. He was my closest musical friend of my life, really, for over 30 years. we were very, very close. And bass and drums. Pat and I would go in,
Sure.
and I would do what I learned from Joe when I was a little kid. We'd go in and we'd run the whole set or the whole record, just bass and drums. When it came time to record it or perform it, man, we had this thing down. It was so great.
I'm very sorry.
Right on.
Well, Billy, I do want to say thank you for your kindness, and
My pleasure, Dean.
the bass is an instrument. It's an appendage. And it's an extension of you, of course. It's what you've made your career doing. But let's strip that away for a minute and let's look at you and the people that you've just honored and talked about. We're not talking about, who's famous and who's got the great hits and who's hitting the charts. You're talking about people and some kindness and some love for music and a global, international, universal language that have brought you together with many hundreds, maybe thousands of, constituents and fans, thousands of people, millions of people around the world.
Incredible.
And I want to tell you that the conversations we've had over the recent times have meant a lot to me, because it wasn't, I'm a rock star and, I'll give you 10 seconds of my time, and who are you anyway?
I'm not a rock star, I'm a bass player.
You're a rock star of a very kind and generous human being, and I do mean that sincerely. I have no shame in telling you that to your face, and this interview will not be edited and not be left out, because it means something to me.
Very kind, but it takes one to know one. Thank you, my friend.
I do mean it, Billy. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just spent a very short but powerful amount of time listening and watching Mr. Billy Sheehan I call him the Godfather of bass. There's a few examples that I would definitely probably hold him with, and that would be Mr. Lee, and of course, I can't omit Mr. Levin. So those are the three wise men that I looked for when I'm looking at bass. It's Mr. Sheehan, Mr. Lee, and Mr. Levin. I got to say, there's
an honor to be in the company of those two gentlemen, for sure.
Yeah, no, thank you. Billy, BillySheehan.com is your website. You're on social media. We'll be posting those with the segment so people can follow you. There's probably about 8 people that don't know who you are, but they probably don't know exactly all of your social media. So we'll be.
I try to answer everything, and it's a daunting task, as you know. I mean, we Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, 2 pages on Facebook, but I love being in touch with people. I get email from all over the world, from Afghanistan and Iraq and India. I get more email from Indonesia than anywhere. Amazing.
That's incredible.
And all over Europe and South America, Brazil and Argentina and Chile and everywhere. So I'm very pleased about that. And people are kind enough to take the time to write. I always try to reciprocate and get back to them, even if it's just a thumbs up or thanks a lot or whatever. At least they know I got their message and I appreciate it. So if you do write to me, any of your listeners or watchers write to me, I'll do my best to respond always. And also, I'm happy to answer any questions about bass and gear or songwriting or records, anything I can help out. I enjoy doing that.
That's remarkable, and thank you very much.
And your dad is a badass trombone player, so your listeners must know I was very impressed with that.
Oh, thank you very much. He is that, and he's a badass example of a great dad and a great role model. And without him, I wouldn't have music in my veins. I wouldn't have any of this disease that we love to address every day.
Suffer through.
Yes. I do respect that. He's not a rock and roller, and I totally I applaud that, and I'm glad that he's not, because there's great contrast between what he grew up with and what there is today, and that gave me an appreciation as it did to you growing up, and the songs and the bands and the genre of music that you were speaking of. So
the trombone is kind of in the same range also as a bass, so there's always been kind of a thing between bone players and bass players.
Right. Well, he's got 20 years on the clock to you, and I don't see him stopping. He's probably, they're not doing any gigs right now, but he's probably practicing at home at least 3 times a week to keep his chops up.
Brilliant.
And I just don't know where he gets it. And you'll probably be 20 to 30 years from now down in that studio with probably a few more toys hanging,
But
doing
to
the
hang some
same.
more.
Yes.
Yeah. Great. Well, Dean, thanks
Well,
very
thank
much for
you.
having me.
Thank you, Billy.
Again, any of your listeners or watchers want to drop me a line, I'm happy to respond. And let's stay in touch. Give my best to your dad.
I sure will. I thank you very much. Billy, I'm going to close out with a little outro with you, and then I'm going to hit stop record, and then I'll say goodbye to you.
Great.
Okay. Once again, everybody, please swing on over to BillySheehan.com. You can find out what Billy's doing, where he's touring, what project he's working on, what surprises are in store for you. You probably won't get a virtual tour like you did today with all the axes and goodies hanging on the wall and otherwise, but you will be able to stay in contact with him and email him. And then we'll be posting his social media as well. And Billy, I just want to say again, thank you so much for being a guest on the patio today.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thanks for having me. And I wish you and all your listeners and watchers the absolute best.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Billy.
That's a wrap.